My name is Sonia Hendrickson, and I was 8 years old when I finally understood that my parents didn't love me the way parents are supposed to love their child. It wasn't a single moment. There was no dramatic argument, no screaming confession. It was quieter than that, worse, in a way. It arrived in pieces, in pauses that lingered too long, in looks that slid past me as if I were furniture, in the way my presence seemed to drain the air from a room. My parents had me young. That fact followed me everywhere, like a label I couldn't peel off. They had me in their early 20s, just as they were trying to establish themselves, just as their lives were supposedly beginning. I grew up hearing about everything they had sacrificed: careers delayed, sleep lost, opportunities missed. They never said outright that I was the reason, but they didn't need to. The message seeped into me anyway. You came too early. You ruined the timing of our lives. As a child, I didn't have words like resentment or emotional neglect. I just knew how it felt to live in a house where love was conditional and silence was punishment. My mother rarely touched me unless it was to guide me out of the way. My father spoke to me like I was a problem to be managed rather than a daughter to be raised. At home, I learned how to disappear. I learned which creaks in the floor meant irritation, which sighs meant I should retreat to my room, which questions would earn a sharp response and which ones would be ignored altogether. I learned to keep my voice low, my needs smaller, my emotions tightly folded away. I honestly believed, that if I could just be less, they might tolerate me more. But tolerance was the best I ever got. In public, though, my parents transformed. They smiled effortlessly at family gatherings. They praised me in front of friends. They told stories about what a bright and independent little girl I was. Afterward, in the car, my mother would lean close and whisper threats through clenched teeth. Don't ever contradict us. Don't ever make us look bad. I nodded every time. I complied with everything they asked because I was afraid that if I gave them one more reason to be disappointed, they would finally admit what I already suspected, that I wasn't wanted. That fear became my constant companion. It followed me into school, into friendships, into the way I saw myself. Eventually, the neglect caught up with me. I started falling behind in class. My teachers complained that I wasn't paying attention, that I was disruptive, that I talked back. What they didn't see was a little girl desperately trying to be noticed by anyone at all. Acting out became my language. If I couldn't be loved, at least I could be seen. Instead of asking why I was struggling, my parents punished me. I was grounded, lectured, made to feel like a failure. Every phone call from a teacher felt like another charge added to a case against me. Their anger wasn't concern, it was embarrassment. I wasn't misbehaving because I needed help. I was misbehaving because I was making them look bad. So I pushed further. Somewhere in my childlike logic, I convinced myself that any attention was better than none. If they were angry, at least they were looking at me. But even that stopped working. Their reactions grew colder, more distant, as if they were already detaching, preparing themselves for a life where I wasn't central anymore. I didn't know it then, but I was already being replaced. Around my 8th birthday, the atmosphere in our house changed. My mother started humming while she cooked. My father came home lighter, energized. They whispered to each other at night, voices low but excited. I watched them carefully, confused by this unfamiliar warmth that never seemed to include me. Then came my birthday party. The living room was filled with relatives, balloons taped crookedly to the walls, cake sitting half melted on the table. I remember standing there with frosting on my fingers when my parents clinked their glasses and asked for everyone's attention. They announced the pregnancy like it was a victory. Cheers erupted. My aunts cried, my grandparents hugged them. I clapped because everyone else did, because that was what was expected of me. But inside, something dropped. I watched my parents' faces, really watched them, and saw something I had never seen directed at me. Pure joy. It hit me then, in a way no child should have to understand. This was what they had been waiting for. Not just another child, a do-over. Not long after, they sat me down at the kitchen table. Their tone was calm, rehearsed. They told me I'd be going to live with my aunt for a while. They said it was for my own good, that I needed structure, that a fresh start would help me. I knew the truth even then. They needed space. They needed room for the baby, for their happiness, for a life where I wasn't in the way. I begged. I cried. I promised to behave better, to get better grades, to stop being difficult. I told them I could change. I would do anything. They didn't waver. Their decision was final. As I packed my small suitcase, I felt something inside me harden. Not anger, not hatred, just a quiet understanding that I was being removed from my own family, neatly and efficiently, like an inconvenient piece of furniture. That night, as I lay awake listening to my parents talk excitedly about names and nursery colors, I realized something that would follow me for the rest of my life. I had never been their priority, and I never would be. The morning my aunt came to pick me up, my parents didn't cry. They stood by the front door, arms folded, watching as I dragged my small suitcase across the floor. The wheels kept catching on the edge of the rug, and every jolt felt like a reminder that this wasn't temporary, no matter how many times they insisted it was. My mother crouched in front of me and adjusted my jacket, her touch brisk and impersonal. "This is for the best, Sonia," she said, like she was reciting a line she'd practiced. "Your aunt has more patience, more time." She didn't say because we don't, but it hovered in the air between us. My father cleared his throat. "You'll be happier there. Less pressure." I almost laughed. The pressure wasn't school, it wasn't discipline, it was them. But I swallowed the thought because I'd learned long ago that honesty only made things worse. When my aunt hugged me, it was the first time that morning someone held me like they actually meant it. Her arms wrapped around me firmly, protectively, and she whispered, "I've got you." I didn't know how badly I needed to hear that until my chest started to ache. The drive to her house was quiet. I stared out the window, watching familiar streets disappear, feeling like I was being erased from my own life. I kept waiting for my parents to call, to change their minds, to say they'd made a mistake. They didn't. Life with my aunt was different. Not perfect, not magical, but safe. She asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer. She helped me with homework without sighing. She noticed when I was sad, when I was angry, when I was trying too hard to be good. She didn't flinch at my moods or label me difficult. She told me I was a child, and that children were allowed to be messy. At first, I didn't trust it. I kept my bags packed for weeks, convinced I'd be sent back. I slept lightly, waiting for raised voices. But they never came. Slowly, cautiously, I started to breathe. My grades improved. My teachers smiled instead of complained. I stopped acting out because I didn't need to anymore. For the first time, I wasn't performing for attention. I was receiving it freely. Months turned into years. My parents called. Occasionally at first. Short, awkward conversations. Polite questions that felt obligatory. Then the calls grew further apart. Birthdays passed with cards signed in rushed handwriting. Holidays came and went without invitations. Eventually, I stopped missing them. I told myself it didn't hurt, that I was better off. Most days that was true, but sometimes, late at night, I wondered how easily they had let me go, how quickly I had become optional. By the time I reached college, 12 years had passed. That's when my phone rang. It was my mother's number. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Her voice was overly warm, almost cheerful. She talked about reconnecting, about family, about how proud they were of me. Something in her tone felt off, too rehearsed, too eager. It didn't take long to find out why. My younger sister was 12 now, and she was making mistakes. Suddenly, my success mattered. They wanted me back in their lives, not because they regretted abandoning me, but because they needed proof. Proof that they weren't bad parents. Proof that they had done something right. As I listened, the truth settled in quietly and painfully. I wasn't being invited home. I was being used. I should have hung up the phone. Instead, I listened. My mother spoke in long, careful sentences, as if she were choosing each word to sound just right. She told me how hard things had been lately, how confusing it was to raise a teenager, how worried they were about my younger sister, their daughter, who had started skipping classes, arguing with teachers, and, according to my father, embarrassing the family. That word again, embarrassing. They never asked how I was doing. Not really. They already knew the surface details, college, internships, scholarships, because my aunt had proudly shared them with relatives. What they wanted wasn't conversation. It was confirmation. "People keep asking about you," my mother said lightly. "They remember how bright you were." I almost laughed at that. Were. As if I had stopped existing the moment I left their house. They talked about how important family image was, about how people were starting to whisper now that my sister was acting out, about how raising one successful child proved something. That's when it clicked. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because my sister, raised with everything I never had, was beginning to unravel. and they needed a counterexample, me. I let them talk. I let them build their narrative. According to them, they had stayed involved. They had supported me financially. They had sacrificed quietly while my aunt helped. The lies were smooth, practiced. Maybe they'd told them often enough that they believed them now. I didn't interrupt. When there was a pause, I spoke. "You didn't raise me," I said calmly. "You removed me." Silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable. My father snapped first. He said I was being dramatic, ungrateful, that they had done their best. When I reminded them that the money they sent barely covered textbooks, let alone living expenses, my mother scoffed and said I should be grateful for anything at all. Then I asked about my sister. They hesitated. Then the truth slipped out. She'd been caught smoking at her birthday party, in front of relatives. Photos had circulated. Questions were being asked. Their perfect image was cracking. They talked about how she had too much freedom, too much money, no discipline. They said it like a complaint, not a confession. I saw the pattern immediately. Neglect me, then overindulge her. Two different methods. Same failure. "You failed both of us," I said. That's when the yelling started. They accused me of being bitter, of turning my back on the family. My father said something that would have destroyed me years ago. That they were glad they sent me away because I was never good enough to begin with. It didn't hurt. It clarified everything. They hung up, probably expecting me to call back, to apologize, to fall in line like I used to. I didn't. For the first time, I felt relief instead of loss. They haven't called since. I've heard through relatives that they're still spinning the story, minimizing my sister's behavior, insisting it's a phase. No one believes them. I don't hate my sister. I pity her. She's still trapped in a house that mistakes control for love and money for guidance. As for me, I've made peace with the truth. Family isn't who gives you life. It's who teaches you how to live. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week after that call, my phone started lighting up again. Missed calls, voicemails, messages that swung wildly between guilt and rage. One moment my mother was crying, saying she didn't recognize herself anymore. The next, my father was demanding I apologize for disrespecting them. I didn't respond. That's when they changed tactics. Relatives started calling me, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were cautious, asking gentle questions. Others came straight out with it. "Why are you being so hard on your parents, after everything they did for you?" I realized then just how deep the lie had gone. My parents were telling everyone they'd stayed involved, that they'd supported me financially and emotionally, that sending me to my aunt was a joint decision made out of love, not convenience. They were rewriting my childhood in real time, and for a moment I wondered if they might actually get away with it, until my aunt spoke up. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't argue, she simply told the truth. Receipts, school records, letters, the years of silence. The reality that she, not my parents, had paid for my clothes, my food, my education, my therapy when I needed it. The family stopped asking questions after that. My parents didn't take the exposure well. My father called me late one night, his voice sharp with anger. He accused me of poisoning the family against them. My mother cried in the background, saying I was destroying everything. When I reminded them that they had destroyed it first, quietly, 12 years ago, they exploded. They told me I was cold, ungrateful, that I should remember where I came from. So I told them where I came from. I came from a house where I wasn't wanted, I said. And I survived because someone else loved me when you wouldn't. They hung up on me. That time, I knew it was final. Months passed, then a year. My parents faded into background noise, occasional rumors, strained smiles at distant gatherings, excuses no one believed anymore. Their image never fully recovered. People saw them differently now. Not as monsters, but as something just as damning, deeply flawed, selfish, and unwilling to take responsibility. I focused on my life. I graduated, I built a career, I made friends who felt like home. I learned how to exist without constantly waiting for rejection. And through it all, my aunt remained my anchor, the woman who stepped in when no one else would. Sometimes I thought about my sister. I didn't blame her. She hadn't asked to be overindulged or ignored in different ways. She was just a kid growing up in chaos disguised as comfort. I hoped, quietly, that one day she'd see the truth too. Then, one evening, I got a message from an unfamiliar number. It was her. She didn't say much, just that she'd been told not to contact me for years, that she was starting to question things, that she didn't know who to trust anymore. I didn't rush. I didn't promise anything. I told her we could talk, slowly, honestly, without lies. It was a fragile beginning, but it was real. And for the first time, I understood something fully, without doubt or grief attached. Family isn't defined by who claims you. It's defined by who shows up, who stays, and who loves you without conditions. Everything I am today was built on that truth, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.